The corridor outside operating room 4 smelled like soap metal and something sharp that stung the back of the throat. June Callahan followed the green line on the floor, past silent doors and blinking sanitizer stations. Grayson Memorial rose over Pittsburgh like a glass ship. From the 10th floor, you could see the Monongahela sliding under the bridges, dull and steady, carrying flecks of winter light. Inside, everything was bright. Everything was wiped clean. June paused at the scrub sink, not because she needed the placard, but because her hands liked ritual. 2 minutes, fingers to elbows, nails last. She turned the water on. It ran hot, then hotter, as if the pipes took offense at hesitation. Foam gathered between her fingers. She watched it swirl down the drain and listened. In the distance behind double doors, there was a sound like a heartbeat. Not a human one, a machine one. Beep, beep, beep. Each note clean, perfectly spaced, like a metronome that never got tired. She counted with her thumb against her index finger. 1, 2, 3, a small habit. On the wall across from her, a framed photo showed the hospital's trauma team in matching scrubs lined up and smiling. Dr. Grant Holloway sat in the center posture, perfect. June's name was not on the plaque beneath it. Of course it was not. She shut the water off with her elbow. The silence snapped back in thick and sterile. She dried her hands, opened her locker, and took out her cap. The cap was plain. No jokes, no bright colors. In her pocket sat a small coin warm from her body heat. She touched it once, a quick check. Metal, ridged edge, the stamped eagle that caught on her fingertip. She did not look at it. A nurse in purple scrubs walked past and nodded. "Morning, Dr. Callahan." "Morning," June said, and her voice sounded flat in the tile. "You're with Holloway's team." June nodded. She had been told the assignment twice already, as if her hearing might be part of the onboarding paperwork. She pushed through the doors into the prep area. The air was colder on the other side, conditioned to keep bacteria sleepy. Stainless steel carts waited in rows. Trays were covered in blue wrap corners folded tight. At the far end, Nurse Tasha Wynn stood with a clipboard and a look that missed nothing. She was tying her hair back with a practiced pull, then double-checking her gloves as if she did not trust the first pair. Her eyes slid to June and held. "You're June," Tasha said. "Yes." Tasha gave a small nod, not warm, not cold, accurate. Or 4, second assist. June read the board procedure, surgeon anesthesiology nursing. Her name was written in neat block letters. Callahan. Below it, the first assist was Dr. Samir Patel, PGY 3, underlined twice. Patel appeared on cue, tugging at his mask straps as he walked. He was thin and quick, with eyes that darted like someone who slept in short bursts. He flashed a grin when he saw her. "Hey, you're the new trauma doc, right?" June did not correct him. "I'm June." "Samir," he said, as if she could have missed the badge. "Listen, Holloway's a little particular." June kept her face neutral. "About what?" Patel leaned closer, lowering his voice, playful but careful. "About everything." "You'll be fine. Just don't surprise him," noted, June said. Patel studied her for a second, waiting for a joke or nerves. He did not get either. His smile softened, then returned. He moved on checking labels, touching nothing twice. June stepped to the instrument table and looked down. Scalpel handles, hemostats, retractors aligned with ruler precision. The overhead lights made the metal shine too bright. The reflection caught her eyes and forced her to blink. She adjusted a clamp, a 1/4 inch to the left. The motion was small, but it eased an itch in her mind. The tray now felt balanced. "Don't mess with Tasha's layout," a voice said behind her. June turned. Dr. Marla Keene stood by the door, already gowned, hands held up like a surgeon in a painting. Her eyes were sharp above the mask, and her brow was permanently arched, as if the world had disappointed her and she had taken notes. "Tasha and I have an understanding," Keene went on. "You move something, she'll notice." June glanced at Tasha. The nurse did not look up, but June could feel her attention. "I adjusted one clamp," June said. Keene's eyes creased in a smile that did not reach the top of her face. "That's how it starts." June held Keene's gaze. She did not apologize. She did not defend herself. She simply turned back and kept her hands still. Keene drifted closer, her voice low. "So, you're the transfer." June did not like the word, new hire. Keene made a small sound that could have been a laugh. "Sure." Keene's gaze flicked toward the inner door where the lead surgeon would enter. "This place eats quiet people." June kept her eyes on the instruments, only if they let it. For a beat, Keene's skepticism slipped into curiosity. Then it returned familiar and sharp. The inner door opened. Dr. Grant Holloway walked in as if the room belonged to him. He was not tall in a way that made people stare, but he carried height in his shoulders in the clean line of his posture. His cap sat perfect. His mask covered his mouth, but his eyes did enough talking. He scanned the board, the trays, the people. He stopped on June. "Callahan," he said. "Yes, Dr. Holloway." He did not say welcome. His eyes moved over her like a checklist. Then he turned to Patel. Second assist is the new girl? Holloway's voice was even almost bored. Patel hesitated. Yes, sir. Dr. Callahan. Keen's eyes crinkled as if she had heard a joke before the punchline. Holloway looked back at June. You've been in a real trauma room before? June heard the emphasis on real. Yes. How many thoracotomies have you assisted on? June answered the question he asked, not the one he meant. More than 50. Patel's eyebrows jumped. Keen's eyes narrowed. Holloway paused. His gaze sharpened. Assisted. Yes, June said. Holloway nodded once, filing her away. Good. Try to keep up, and don't faint when we open. Keen chuckled softly, a sound that could hide behind a cough. June did not react. She reached for her gown and tied it movements neat and controlled. The cloth felt stiff. It never fit right. She flexed her fingers inside the gloves, letting air slide out at the wrists. The latex gripped the calluses at the base of her thumb. The small scar there was old and pale, a thin line from a shattered vial that broke in her hand years ago. Out there, nobody had stopped to ask if she was okay. They had just shoved another tray at her and pointed at the bleeding. This gown felt like paper pretending to be armor. In her head, fabric shifted into something else. Canvas, dusty straps, the weight of a vest that pulled at her shoulders, a field tent that snapped in the wind, a generator coughing outside, angry and constant. Under that sound, the rotor beat of a medevac bird thump after thump as if the sky had a pulse. She blinked once, and the memory folded away. The room returned bright and polished. Articulating arms held monitors at perfect angles. A suction canister waited like a clear stomach. The overhead lights washed everything into the same color, making blood look too theatrical when it finally appeared. Keen watched her head tilted. You don't flinch, she said. June kept tying her sleeve. Should I? Keen's eyes narrowed, amused. Most people flinch their first week. June met her gaze for a beat. I'm not most people. Patel pretended not to listen, but his ears went red. Tasha stepped in to tie the back. Her fingers were quick, firm. As she leaned in, she spoke with her mouth close to June's ear. Don't take it personal, Tasha said. June kept her eyes forward. I'm not. Tasha pulled the knot tight. He tests everybody, but he enjoys testing some more than others. June breathed in, breathed out. The beeps from a distant monitor kept time. Holloway turned away and spoke to Keen and Patel. We have a routine case before noon. Let's not make it complicated. Amen, Keen said. Patel nodded, eager. June stood at the edge of the sterile field, hands up, waiting. Waiting was a skill. The room hummed with ventilation and the tiny clicks of tools. Somewhere beyond the walls, the city moved wet pavement and muffled horns. June's eyes drifted to a narrow window cut into the OR doors. Through it, the hall looked distant, like a world you could not touch. Farther down, a set of windows caught a slice of river and the steel of a bridge. People crossed it without looking down. From this angle, the bridge looked effortless, a line of steel over dark water. June knew better. Anything that carried bodies had weight. She tapped her thumb, once, twice, and let the rhythm settle in her chest again quietly. June pressed her fingers against the coin in her pocket. The edge bit back. She felt the ridges felt something made to last. Holloway spoke again, not to her, but loud enough for her to hear. Where did they find her? Keen answered with a shrug in her voice. HR miracle. Patel gave a polite laugh that did not sound polite. June kept her gaze on the center of the room, on the empty table, on the clean blue drapes waiting to be pulled. She let their words pass through her like cold air. She had been ignored in rooms where the only light came from a swinging bulb, where the air tasted of fuel. She had learned not to spend emotion on people who confuse noise for authority. The beeping continued steady and indifferent. June stood ready, silent as the metal around her. A sharp tone cut through the hum of ventilation. Not an alarm from the monitors, but the hospital overhead clipped and urgent. Trauma alert. Level 1. Gunshot wounds. Emergency department to operating room. Trauma team respond. The room changed shape without anyone moving furniture. Patel's shoulders lifted. Keen's eyes sharpened. Tasha set her clipboard down as if the paper had suddenly become irrelevant. Holloway did not look surprised. He looked satisfied, like a man handed a stage. Positions, he said, and the word landed flat, practiced. Keen checked her gown cuffs. Patel pulled his gloves tighter, the latex snapping softly at the wrist. Tasha leaned toward the scrub sink and began laying out fresh packs without being asked. June watched the hands, not the faces, in places where the air shook. Hands told the truth. A second overhead call followed closer in time, as if the building itself were catching its breath. Male, late 20s, multiple gunshot wounds to chest and abdomen, pressure unstable, ETA 1 minute. Holloway turned his head just enough to include June in his vision. Callahan, you stay where I can see you. You suction when I tell you. You do not freelance. Yes, Dr. June said. Keen gave a quiet little sound that could have been amusement. He says that to everyone, she murmured, then almost kindly, and he means it most with you. June did not answer. Her thumb pressed the coin through her pocket once. Metal met skin, the edge bit back. The doors swung open, and cold air rushed in from the hall, carrying the smell of wet coats and city wind. 2 paramedics pushed a gurney fast enough that the wheels squealed against the polished floor. A police officer followed close behind, jaw-clenched eyes, darting like he expected trouble to leap out of the walls. The patient's clothes had been cut away in strips. Gauze covered his chest in thick pads already soaked dark. An oxygen mask sat crooked on his face. His skin was the gray of someone losing the argument with gravity. Name's Navarro, the first paramedic said, breath coming hard. Eli Navarro, 27, found at a corner store off Carson Street. 2 to the chest, 1 abdomen. We lost his pressure twice in the rig, got him back with fluids and pressure dressings. Holloway stepped in like a conductor. Move him over, on my count. 1, 2, 3. They transferred him to the operating table. The gurney clanged lightly against steel. The patient's body shifted with a heavy, helpless slide that made June's stomach tighten. She had seen stronger men fall quieter than this. Anesthesiology moved in fast and smooth. The anesthesiologist's voice stayed calm even as his hands did 3 things at once. Let's get monitors. Big bore access. Blood available. Type and screen sent, a nurse answered. Running now. Holloway peeled back a corner of the gauze. Fresh blood welled up immediately. Not a steady ooze, but a pulsing push that made the pad jump. Keen whistled through her teeth. That's lively. Tasha shot her a look. Keen shut up. June stood at the side rail, hands held up, watching the chest rise and fall under the oxygen mask. The rise was uneven. The left side lagged like a door that did not want to open all the way. She noted the angle of the bandage, the placement of the pressure, dressing the way the paramedics had wrapped him tight. She could smell gunpowder under antiseptic. Faint, but present a bitter edge that did not belong in a hospital. As the team stripped more gauze away, the dog tag slid into view near his collarbone, half stuck to skin with sweat. The metal caught the overhead light and flashed. June's throat went dry. The tags looked exactly like every set she had seen overseas, only more worn. They hung on a black chain that had been repaired with a twist of tape. On his wrist was a paracord bracelet frayed at the knot. The knot was a certain way, a habit sailors and Marines learned from older hands. There was a small scar on his thumb, white and clean, the kind that came from a burn, not a knife. June stared at the scar as if it were a word she could read. The anesthesiologist spoke again. Pressure 68 systolic, heart rate 120. He's compensating. Barely. Holloway's voice did not rise. Get him intubated. We are going to the chest first. The paramedic hovered near the door. Doc, he kept trying to talk in the rig. Kept asking if somebody called his sister. We'll call whoever we need to call after he has a pulse worth keeping. Holloway said. He did not say it cruelly. He said it like a policy. June felt Keen's gaze slide toward her. Keen's eyes narrowed, as if she had caught something on June's face. You know him, Keen asked softly, a private question hidden behind the noise. June did not blink, no. Keen held her gaze for a second longer, then looked away unconvinced, but not pressing. Subtext lived in that pause. Keen had built a career out of smelling lies. June had built a life out of surviving them. The anesthesiologist pushed medication. Eli's eyelids fluttered and settled. His jaw slackened. The oxygen mask was removed and replaced with a laryngoscope and tube. The ventilator took over with a mechanical hiss. His chest rose more evenly now, but the left side still lagged stubborn. Patel leaned close to June, voice low. That's a bad one. June watched the chest wall. Yes. Patel waited for more. It did not come. He swallowed and refocused on his job. Holloway snapped his fingers at a circulating nurse. Call radiology. I want a quick portable if we can get it in before we cut. We can do a fast chest film, the nurse said. 30 seconds. Do it. The portable machine rolled in. The plate slid under Eli's back with a careful lift. June helped, feeling the heat of his skin through her glove. He was warm, still fighting. Still there. For a split second, as they lifted him, the dog tag slipped free and clinked against the table edge. The sound hit June like a pebble thrown against glass. She reached out before she could think and caught them, keeping the tags from sliding off into the mess of sheets and cords. Her fingers closed around the metal. Navarro, Eli, USMC. A line beneath it, smaller, a blood type, and a religion. The metal was dented at one corner, a dent like a tooth mark. June's thumb traced the dent without permission. The last time she had held dog tags like that, it had been under a red light in a vibrating cabin while rotor noise hammered the air. Thump! 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 A medic shouting in her ear, sand in the teeth, blood in the seams of gloves. Someone screaming a name that did not match the face yet because faces blurred when you move too fast. She closed her hand tighter and the memory folded back into itself. The hospital lights stayed white. The air stayed cold. No dust, no wind, just the faint smell of city rain and something burnt. June set the dog tags carefully on a clean corner of the instrument tray, away from the edge, away from gravity. Tasha saw the motion and did not comment. Her eyes flicked to June's hand, then to June's face, and then away. A note taken, filed, stored. The portable film printed quickly. Holloway glanced at it, then at the patient. Left side looks ugly. We are not waiting. Move. He stepped to the operating room doors and pushed through. The team followed, a tight cluster, moving fast. Pushing the table, guiding cords, calling out clearance. Wheels rattled. A bag of fluid swung and tapped the pole with each turn. As they rolled down the hall, they passed a window. Outside, the river was a dark ribbon, thick with winter. A bridge cut across it. Steel ribs arched against a low sky. A car crossed with headlights, on small and steady. June's eyes caught on the bridge without meaning to. Her chest tightened, then eased. She pressed her thumb against the coin again, a silent count. Inside operating room 4, the lights were already on. The metal waited where it had waited, polished and indifferent. The empty table that had looked clean a moment ago now looked like a promise it could not keep. Holloway took his place at the head of the table. "Time out," he said, and the room answered with the ritual of names, procedure, allergies. Words that steadied hands by giving them something familiar to hold. Eli Navarro, the nurse, read, "Exploratory thoracotomy with possible laparotomy. Consent unable due to condition." "Proceed," Holloway said. Keene moved to her side. Patel took first assist at Holloway's shoulder. June positioned herself as second assist where Holloway had ordered her close enough to reach far enough to be managed. She could feel his preference for tidy hierarchies for clean lanes. The anesthesiologist checked into the ventilator and called out numbers. "Pressure is still soft. 65 systolic. Heart rate 125. We are hanging on." Tasha painted Eli's chest and abdomen with antiseptic, the liquid cold and brown, a chemical shine that made his skin look unreal. She draped him in blue. The square of exposed flesh left at center looked too small for the amount of trouble inside it. Holloway held out his hand without looking. Tasha placed the scalpel into his palm with a crisp, practiced motion. June watched the blade catch the light, watched Holloway's fingers settle around the handle like it was familiar as breath. The beeping from the monitor kept its rigid tempo, and June stood with her hands raised, eyes on the patient's chest, feeling the room narrow to a single point of focus. The scalpel slid into skin with a soft, wet sound that did not match the brightness of the room. Holloway made the first cut straight and clean. He did not rush. He never rushed. His left hand spread the tissue with the calm patience of someone who believed time would cooperate if you stayed confident enough. Blood rose to the surface in a glossy sheet, then ran in thin rivulets toward the drapes. Tasha dabbed and caught it before it could travel. Her motions were quick, economical, almost graceful. "Suction," Holloway said. June moved the tip into place. The machine answered with a low, hungry pull. The sound filled the space between heartbeats, a steady slurp that made Patel's jaw tighten. "Pressure," the anesthesiologist called. 60/38, the nurse answered from the monitor. Her voice stayed level, but her eyes did not. Holloway did not look up. "Keep him asleep? Keep him warm? Give me room." Keene leaned in on Holloway's far side. "You want the chest first. Still?" "Yes," Holloway said. Like the question was a formality. June watched his hands. He cut through the superficial layers, then down through fascia. A faint smell of cautery drifted up when he touched the tool to bleeding edges. The scent was sharp, burnt hair and hot metal, a thin line of smoke that vanished into the vents. The beeping on the monitor kept its rigid tempo for a moment. Beep, beep, beep. Then it sped up as if it sensed weakness. "Heart rate 130, the anesthesiologist said. "He is climbing." Holloway's voice stayed controlled. "He is bleeding." "We stop the bleed, he settles." June's suction tip followed the flow as Holloway opened deeper. The blood was not just from skin now. It pooled dark and heavy, and the suction struggled to keep up. June adjusted her angle, keeping the tip just off tissue so it would not latch and bruise. The habits came without thought. Holloway spread the incision. He reached for the retractor. Tasha placed it in his hand before he asked. Metal met metal with a dry click. When the ribs began to separate, there was a hiss of trapped air and something else, a wet pressure release, that made the drape rise a fraction. A thick wave of blood rolled into view, deeper and brighter than before. Patel's breath caught. Keene swore under her mask, barely audible. "There it is," Holloway said, and the confidence in his voice tightened just slightly. "We have a hemothorax. Suction. Pack." June's suction roared, the canister filled with a fast red spiral. Patel stuffed lap pads into the cavity hands, moving too fast, then correcting, then moving fast again. "Pressure is dropping," the anesthesiologist said, and now the calm had edges. 55 systolic. "Start blood," Holloway snapped. "We do not have type yet," the nurse said. "O negative," Holloway said. "Now." A cooler of blood arrived and thudded onto a side table. The anesthesiologist spiked the bag, and the dark fluid began to flow into Eli Navarro's arm. June looked at the entry wounds as much as she could from her position. One in the left anterior chest, slightly higher than she liked, another closer to the sternum, not quite centered. The third sat below the ribs, a small round hole in the abdomen that looked too neat for what it meant inside. She watched the chest wall move with the ventilator. The left side still lagged. Not as obvious now that the retractor held him open, but still there a stubborn unevenness. Holloway leaned into the cavity, searching. "Where is it? Give me light." Tasha adjusted the overhead lamp. The white glare sharpened the view inside Eli's chest. Everything looked wet red urgent. Holloway's gloved fingers probed, sweeping along tissue the way a hand checks for a lost key in a couch. "Pulmonary hilum looks intact," Keene said, peering in. Holloway Patel said, "I cannot see the pericardium well." Holloway grunted. "Lift, retract, give me that DeBakey." Patel handed him the instrument. Holloway's hands were still precise, but the rhythm had changed. More force now, less patience. His shoulders rose, higher tension creeping into the muscles. June kept suction steady. The tip hovered, drawing blood away, giving Holloway visibility. She saw what he saw, and she saw what he did not. A jagged edge of rib flashed under the light. Not a clean break, a splintered fracture. Bone fragments sat like teeth, pale and sharp, against the dark tissue. June's mouth went dry again. Bone fragments moved in her mind like small bullets. They did not follow rules. They did not respect anatomy diagrams. They traveled where pressure sent them, carving channels you found only when you stopped trusting the obvious. "Pressure 50, the anesthesiologist said. "Diastolic is disappearing." "Give calcium," the nurse at the head of the bed said. "Give more." Holloway's jaw clenched. "I need the source. It is in here. It has to be." June's eyes tracked the blood flow. Most of it came from behind the rib line, deeper than Holloway's hands were exploring. It pulsed in a way that suggested an artery, not a vein. It did not spray in dramatic arcs. It seeped and surged, hiding in shadow, then returning as soon as suction cleared it. Holloway followed his own map. He looked where a textbook would tell him to look first. Big vessels, big structures, big answers. June felt her thumb press the coin through fabric once, twice. She did not know she was doing it until the ridged edge bit her finger. In her head, the sound of suction merged with another sound, distant, but familiar. Rotor thump, thump, thump. A cabin vibrating, a medic yelling numbers over engine noise. A patient's eyes open wide under red light, then rolling back as blood pressure left the building. She blinked and the memory folded away again. The hospital lights stayed white. The beeping stayed sharp. "Clamp," Holloway said. Tasha placed it in his hand. Holloway clamped a vessel near the front, then watched. The bleeding did not slow. His breathing changed, shorter now. "Where is it coming from?" he said, quieter. Not to the team, but to the wound itself, as if it were a stubborn opponent refusing to reveal its hiding place. Keene shifted closer. "Could be a tear posterior." Holloway did not answer. Patel's hands shook as he held retraction. Sweat gathered on his forehead under the cap and began to run toward his brow. He blinked hard, fighting the sting. June saw the tremor and understood what he was feeling. Not fear exactly, more like the sick realization that skill might not be enough if you were late. The anesthesiologist raised his voice. "We are losing him. Heart rate 140, pressure 48. He is not perfusing." Holloway's head snapped up for the first time. His eyes cut toward the monitor, then back down into the chest. The confidence in his posture faltered, then returned forced into place. "Keep going," he said. "We can fix this." He reached deeper. His gloved fingers disappeared into shadow. He pulled, and a fresh wave of blood surged up warm and heavy against the suction tip. June adjusted without being told. She moved the suction slightly posterior, closer to the spine line, following the flow. There behind the rib fragment, the blood pulsed in a tight rhythm, tucked where Holloway's hands had not gone. It flashed when the light hit it, then vanished again as tissue shifted. June's eyes locked on the spot. Her mind built the story fast. Entry angle, cavitation, fragmentation, a rib shard, driven inward like a wedge. A vessel torn behind it, hidden by the very damage that caused it. She lifted her gaze to Holloway's hands. He was still hunting interior, still searching for a clean answer. June's throat tightened. She held suction steady and watched Eli's chest fill and empty. The ventilator hissed. The monitor screamed in bursts. The room smelled of blood and cautery and cold air that could not keep up with heat. Holloway's voice rose sharp now. "Suction! I cannot see!" "I have it," June said, and her voice came out calm, almost flat. She angled the tip and cleared the field for half a second. In that half second, the torn vessel behind the rib fragment showed itself again unmistakable. June felt her thumb press the coin one more time. A silent count. A beat. She leaned in a fraction closer to the table and drew a breath through her mask. Suction's clear, she said, keeping her voice low. The bleed is back here, posterior, behind that rib fragment. Holloway's hands paused for a beat, not because he was listening, but because her words had entered his space. He did not look at her. He kept his eyes on the wound as if her voice had come from a vent. I did not ask, he said. June held the suction steady. The vessel pulsed again in the shadow, stubborn and rhythmic, like a warning light that only one person in the room could see. Keen shifted her weight. Patel's eyes flicked toward June, then back to Holloway, then back to the cavity. He looked trapped between two versions of reality. Holloway reached for another clamp. Give me that! Tasha placed it into his hand. Her fingers were steady. Her eyes were on the field, not on egos. Holloway clamped something near the front, a move that made sense on paper. The bleeding did not change. The monitor answered with its own opinion. The beeping tightened, then broke into a higher pitch that made the skin at the base of June's neck prickle. Pressure. 45, the anesthesiologist called. Heart rate 145. Eli Navarro's skin looked waxy under the lights. The exposed square of chest was a bright red world. The rest of him was blue drape and silent. Holloway's shoulders rose. His breath fogged the inside of his shield. He leaned deeper, searching for a clean culprit. Something big, something obvious. He wanted a problem he could name in one sentence. June watched the blood. It surged from the back, not the front. It rode along the curve of rib and muscle, slipping into places that made suction work harder. Each time she cleared it, it returned as if it had been waiting. She spoke again, quieter than before. Intercostal artery, torn behind the rib. If we retract posterior, we can clamp it. Holloway finally looked at her. His eyes were pale and sharp, and they held the cold confidence of a man who had never been forced to improvise with bad light and worse odds. He did not see her as a colleague. He saw her as a variable. You are second assist, he said. Your job is suction. Your job is silence unless I ask. Patel's grip on the retractor tightened. His knuckles went white under latex. Keen's brows lifted amused, but there was something else under it now. A thin line of interest. She was listening with her whole face. June kept her hands up, suction in place. I understand. Holloway's gaze stayed on her half a second longer, a challenge. Then he turned away, satisfied that the hierarchy had been restored. Pack deeper, he told Patel. I want exposure. Patel pushed lap pads farther into the cavity. Blood soaked through them instantly. The pads darkened, heavy and useless. Pressure 40, the anesthesiologist said. We are on the edge. Give more blood, Holloway snapped. We are running wide open, the anesthesiologist replied, and his calm was thinning. We can pour it in, and it is still leaving. June's thumb pressed the coin through fabric once. She did not mean to. The ridged edge bit her skin and pulled her attention back to her hand, back to the present. Holloway reached farther back with his fingers probing without a clear plan, pushing aside tissue like curtains. The movement was more forceful now, less elegant. His gloves came out slick. June watched his hands get close to the right area, then drift away again. He was looking for a straight hallway. The body was a maze. Keen leaned toward him. Grant it could be posterior. A rib shard can do damage you do not see from the front. Holloway did not answer her either, but his jaw tightened, and that was an answer in its own language. I have control, he said. He did not. The bleeding surged again, a fresh push that filled the cavity faster than June could clear it. The suction roared, the canister line trembled. Patel blinked hard, sweat running down his temples under the cap. His voice came out thin. I cannot see anything. It is all red. Hold the retractor steady, Holloway said. Do not move. Patel tried. His hands shook anyway. June adjusted her suction angle, keeping it close to the hidden pulse. If she stayed there, the field cleared just enough that the torn vessel showed itself for a heartbeat, then vanished again behind shifting tissue. It was there. It was real. It had a rhythm. It was killing Eli Navarro in clean white light. June wanted to point again. She wanted to reach in and clamp it herself. The motion lived in her muscles, as natural as turning a steering wheel. But this room had rules. This room had a king. And the king was busy proving he did not need help. Her voice when it came was controlled. Dr. Holloway. What he said, not looking up. June chose her words carefully. Not because she feared him, but because she needed his brain to hear her, not just his pride. The bleed is not central. It is lateral and posterior. The pulse is behind the rib. We can rotate the exposure. Just a few centimeters. Holloway's hand stopped again, a dangerous pause, not because it gave June hope, but because it revealed the truth. He did not know where it was. His eyes lifted to the cavity, and then to the monitors, then back down again. The numbers were cruel and bright, a countdown written in sterile font. He swallowed. It was small, but June saw it. Then Holloway's face hardened. The old posture snapped back into place. No, he said. We are not turning this into a fishing expedition because you think you see something. June felt Keen's eyes on her, waiting to see if she would shrink. Tasha kept working, handing instruments, swapping pads, moving with the focus of a person who had no time for theater. But even she flicked a glance at June, quick as a pulse. June did not move. Her hands stayed steady. Suction stayed on the blood. The room grew louder in small ways. A tray clinked. Someone's shoe squeaked. The ventilator hissed like a steady sigh. Under it all, the monitor sang its relentless song, faster, now thinner. Pressure 38, the anesthesiologist called it. We are losing perfusion. Keene's voice cut in sharper. Grant, if you do not get control, he is going to arrest. Holloway snapped his head toward her. I said I have it. June watched his hands. He clamped something else. The bleeding laughed at it, invisible and wet. Keene went quiet, not because she agreed, but because she knew the kind of man Holloway was. If you pushed him hard in front of a room, he dug in deeper. Pride was not just a personality trait. It was an anesthetic. It dulled the pain of uncertainty. Patel's voice shook. Should we open the abdomen too? That third wound it could be. Not yet, Holloway said. One problem at a time. June's gaze slid down to the abdomen for half a second. The hole looked small. Too neat. She had seen small holes hide big chaos. She filed it away and returned to the chest. The chest was where the blood was leaving fastest. Tasha leaned in close to the field. Suction tubing is filling. Swap canister. Now, Holloway said. A circulating nurse moved fast, switching the canister. The full container sloshed when it lifted. The weight of it was obscene for the time that had passed. Eli's chest rose with the ventilator. It rose, but it did not look like life. It looked like mechanics. The dog tags sat on the tray where June had placed them. The metal had a faint smear of blood now, a thumbprint from her glove. The letters caught light when she shifted. Navarro, Ely. The name stayed in her head as sound, not text. Somewhere in her memory, a voice said it under rotor noise. Not in this hospital. Not in this year. In a place where names were shouted so they would not vanish. June's thumb pressed the coin again. 1, 2. She watched the torn vessel flash behind the rib fragment. She could almost see the clamp in her own hand, feel the pressure, the click. The action was so clear it made her teeth ache. Callahan Holloway said, and this time he looked at her. June met his eyes. His voice dropped, controlled, almost polite. That was worse than shouting. Polite meant he was choosing his words like weapons. Step back, he said. You are crowding my field. June did not argue. She moved half a step back, keeping suction in place, keeping the line clear. She gave him exactly what he asked for, and no more. She watched him lean into the space she had vacated. He still did not go far enough back. The bleeding surged again, and this time it came with a change in the monitor tone that made everyone in the room stiffen. Ventricular ectopy, the anesthesiologist said. He is irritable. We are close. Patel's eyes went wide. He is going to code. No, Holloway said too fast. He is not. June felt a cold steadiness spread through her chest like a switch turning. The noise in the room narrowed to the essentials. Blood, pulse, time. Holloway worked harder. His hands moved faster. The precision began to fray at the edges. He was still skilled. He was still a surgeon. But skill alone did not locate a hidden artery in a bleeding chest while the clock screamed. Keene's voice softened, almost a plea. Grant listened to her. Holloway did not answer. June stood with her hands up and her suction steady, watching the wound tell its story in pulses and shadows. The sterile room felt smaller with every beat. The air smelled heavier, as if the blood had a gravity of its own. The monitor continued its high-thin warning, and June kept her eyes on the place behind the rib fragment where the truth kept flashing into view. Pressure 35, the anesthesiologist said. His voice was still controlled, but the words came out tighter now. We are losing him. Holloway's hands moved faster. He switched instruments without looking up, as if speed could replace direction. He clamped, released, swept again, then clamped something else. Blood surged around his fingers and filled the cavity the moment he let go. Pack, he said. Patel shoved in another lap pad. It turned black with blood before his hand even withdrew. This is not packing, Keene said. This is soaking. Holloway ignored her. His eyes stayed inside the chest pupils locked on a field that refused to behave. His breathing fogged the inside of his shield, then cleared, then fogged again. June kept suction steady. She tracked the flow and cleared it again and again, carving a brief window of visibility that slammed shut as soon as the blood returned. Behind the rib shard, the pulse kept beating. It appeared vanished, appeared again. A vessel torn and hidden? A clean problem disguised by messy physics. June felt the coin in her pocket and did not press it this time. She forced her thumbs still. Her hands were already doing enough. Give EP, the anesthesiologist said. Now. A nurse pushed medication into the line. Eli's heart responded with a jagged run on the monitor, then settled into a faster rhythm that did not feel like stability. It felt like panic written in electricity. Temperature is dropping, the anesthesiologist added. He is cold. Warm him, Holloway said. More blood. We are running 4 units already, the anesthesiologist replied. It is not staying. Holloway's jaw jumped once, a small twitch of frustration. Then he leaned deeper, using the heel of his hand for leverage, pushing aside tissue like it had personally offended him. The sound in the room thickened. Suction ventilator alarms, the occasional clink of steel, the wet slap of saturated pads landing in a basin. Tasha's voice stayed level. Lap count is rising fast. Keep count, Holloway said. Tasha answered. I'm keeping count, and the subtext lived in the calm. She was not just counting pads, she was counting minutes. Keene shifted closer and angled the light again. Grant, you are chasing the front. Look at the back. Holloway did not turn his head. I am looking. You are looking past it, Keene said. Patel's arms trembled under the retractor. His eyes were glassy from staring. He swallowed hard. I cannot feel my fingers. Then lock your elbows, Keene told him not unkindly. Patel tried, and the tremor moved from his hands to his shoulders. June watched his struggle and felt a familiar ache. In another life, in another room, someone would have swapped him out without shame. Not because he was weak, but because fatigue killed. Here the rules were different. Pride filled the gaps where teamwork should have been. The anesthesiologist spoke again, sharper now. We are approaching arrest. He is barely perfusing his brain. Holloway's hands froze for half a second, then resumed with a harsher rhythm. He is not arresting. Keene's eyes narrowed. Grant. Holloway's voice snapped. Not now. June watched the back of Eli's chest wall rise with the ventilator, felt the tension in the room tighten like a wire. The sterile air carried the heat of bodies working hard. Sweat collected under caps and masks. It mixed with antiseptic and cautery and blood until the smell became its own weather. June cleared the field again. The torn vessel flashed behind the rib shard, bright and pulsing. June spoke careful and precise. It is there. I can see it. Behind the fracture. If we rotate exposure, I can clamp it. Holloway's head lifted just enough to show his eyes. They cut toward her flat with irritation. You, he said. You can see it? Yes, June answered. And you want to turn my field, he said. And the word "my" carried the weight of ownership. I want to stop the bleed, June said. Holloway turned back to the wound. Then suction. You are doing that well enough. Keene stared at him, disbelief tightening her brow. Grant, she is telling you exactly where it is. Holloway's voice rose a notch. And I am telling you both to stop talking. The room went quiet in a specific way. Not silent, not calm, but quieter in voices. The machines kept screaming, the bodies kept moving, the words stopped. June felt something shift inside her chest. Not anger, not pride. A hard, clean focus. The kind that arrived when there was no time left to be polite. She had not come here to win anyone's approval. She had come here to work. She had done this before in places that smelled like fuel and dust and light, that flickered with radios hissing and boots stomping outside a tent. There nobody argued about titles when blood was leaving a body. Holloway reached for the rib spreader and widened the opening another fraction. Eli's chest opened further ribs, straining against metal. The tissue trembled with each ventilator push. A fresh wave of blood surged heavier than the last. It spilled over Patel's pads and soaked the drapes. The monitor responded with a harsh stutter. Via fib, the anesthesiologist said, and now the calm was gone. We have ventricular fibrillation. A sound like a collective inhale moved through the room. Holloway's eyes snapped up. For the first time, they looked frightened. Internal paddles, he barked. Tasha already had them. She placed them into Keene's hands. Keene did not wait for permission. She slid the paddles into the open chest, pressed them gently against the heart. Clear, Keene said. Clear, the anesthesiologist echoed. Shock. Eli's body jolted small but undeniable. The monitor jumped, then fell back into chaos. Again, the anesthesiologist said. Again. Keene's voice stayed steady, clear. Shock. The rhythm shifted. It did not become pretty, but it became something. A fast, ugly beat that meant the heart had agreed for now to keep going. Sinus tack, the anesthesiologist said, breath rough. Back. Pressure is 32. 32 was not a victory. It was permission to keep fighting. Holloway leaned back into the chest immediately as if the shock had reset the room and he could return to being the hero. His hands resumed their hunt, even more frantic. Find it, he said, voice tight. Find the source. June held suction and watched the back of the cavity fill again. She cleared it. The vessel flashed. She cleared it again. It flashed again, pulsing like a stubborn beacon. She looked at Holloway's hands. He was still forward, still central, still wrong. Patel's eyes were wide now. He looked at June over the drapes, pleading without words. Not for comfort, for a plan. Keene met June's gaze for the first time in a long, steady look. The cynicism had drained from her eyes. What remained was recognition. She believed June. Tasha stepped in to replace pads, her movements crisp. She leaned close to June's shoulder, as if she were simply doing her job, and murmured barely audible. If you need something, say it. June did not look at her. She nodded once. The anesthesiologist's voice rose again. We are not keeping up. Pressure is 28. He is going to crash again. Halloway's hands shook, just a little, enough to be real. He swallowed. His eyes darted to the monitor, then back down. He spoke to himself under his breath. Where are you? Where? June watched him search. She watched seconds leak away in clean white light. She felt the old switch click all the way over. June raised her voice not loud, but firm, cutting through the mechanical noise. Dr. Halloway! Stop! Halloway's head snapped toward her. Excuse me. Stop chasing anterior, June said. We need posterior exposure now. Halloway's face tightened. You do not tell me to stop in my room. Keen's voice entered sharp and unafraid. Grant, listen. Halloway's eyes flicked to Keen, then back to June. The room was waiting. Even Patel stopped moving for a beat, retractor held in a frozen tremble. June kept her tone even. There is an arterial pulse behind the rib fracture. It is consistent. It is the primary bleed. If we rotate the field and retract posterior, I can place a clamp. Halloway's nostrils flared. He looked at the wound again, then at the monitor. He looked like a man caught between the story he wanted and the story the body was telling. Pressure 26, the anesthesiologist said. Halloway's eyes hardened. No, we are not changing course because you think you are seeing ghosts. June did not flinch at the word. Ghosts were real to her. Not in the way he meant. She kept her hands steady. She kept her voice calm. It is not a guess, she said. It is there. I have visual. Halloway's voice rose sharp enough to slice. You are out of line. June felt her heartbeat slow, the way it always did, when everything else sped up. The noise in the room narrowed to a thin band, the monitor, the suction, the torn pulse in the dark. Keen's eyes stayed on Halloway. Grant, you are losing him. Halloway's jaw clenched. His shoulders rose. His hands hovered over the chest, unsure for the first time where to go next. Patel's voice cracked. Doctor, tell us what to do. Halloway turned his head toward Patel, then back to the cavity. He did not answer. His silence was louder than any alarm. June took a breath and made the decision she had been holding back. She stepped closer into the edge of Halloway's space, careful not to break sterile field. Her hands stayed up. Suction stayed controlled, her eyes locked on the posterior bleed point. Move the retractor, she said to Patel, not asking. 2 centimeters posterior, slow. Patel froze. He looked at Halloway for permission. Halloway's eyes flashed. Do not touch anything unless I tell you. June kept her gaze on Patel, voices steady. Patel, now. Keen inhaled sharply. Tasha's head turned a fraction, watching. Patel's hands trembled. Then he shifted the retractor the smallest amount, just enough to change the angle. The field opened. For a brief, clean moment, the hidden vessel was exposed, pulsing bright behind the rib shard, like a cord under tension. June saw it clearly. Everyone could see it now. Halloway stared, and something in his face moved. Not humility, not yet. Something simpler. Surprise. The monitor screamed again. Pressure 22, the anesthesiologist said. He is slipping. June held suction on the pulse point, clearing the view. Clamp, she said, and this time she did not direct it at Halloway. She directed it at the room. Tasha placed a clamp into June's open hand without hesitation. Metal met glove. The familiar weight settled into her palm. June brought the clamp into the wound the way a diver slips into dark water, slow and sure. Her eyes stayed on the pulsing point behind the rib shard. The vessel flashed again. She opened the jaws, angled them around the slick cord of tissue, and closed. Click. The pulse stopped. For a heartbeat, the cavity looked almost calm. Blood still pooled in the low places, but the relentless surge eased into a sluggish seep. The suction sound dropped in pitch, less hungry. Patel stared into the opening as if someone had turned on a light. Keen's shoulders released a fraction. Pressure, June said. Not as a request, but as a check. 24, the anesthesiologist answered. Still low. June kept the clamp steady. She could feel the vessel tremble under metal, trying to push through. She did not give it room. With her other hand, she guided suction to clear the remaining blood carving space for the next move. Her mind went quiet in a way that felt almost physical. No extra thoughts, no extra feelings, only steps. Get me a second clamp, she said. Halloway's hands hovered over the field. He looked at the clamp in June's hand, then at the place it sat, then at the blood that had finally slowed. His mouth moved behind the mask as if he were about to say something, then stopped. Keen reached toward Tasha. Hemostat. Tasha placed it into Keen's palm. Keen offered it to June. Halloway snapped. No, give it to me. Keen did not move. Her eyes stayed on the wound. You can take it when he has a pressure. The anesthesiologist's voice cut in brisk. He is unstable. If you want him to survive this, we need control first. Halloway's eyes flashed. He turned toward the head of the bed. Deep in anesthesia, he is moving. Eli's chest wall twitched under the retractor, a small ripple that was not the ventilator. His hand strapped on the armboard flexed. The fingers curled as if searching for something to hold. The anesthesiologist shook his head once. I can push more, but his pressure will drop. He is riding the edge. June kept her hands where they were. We keep control, we fix the leak, then you can give him the ocean. A thin sound came from Eli's throat, trapped behind the tube. It was not a word. It was effort. Patel's eyes widened. He is waking. He cannot be waking, Holloway said. And the denial sounded automatic, like he did not want the room to have another problem. Eli's eyelids fluttered under tape. For a second they stayed shut. Then they opened slow and glassy, like a man surfacing through thick water. His eyes rolled unfocused, then snapped toward the brightest thing in his world. The surgical lights. His pupils tightened, his chest heaved against the ventilator in a sudden fight. The ventilator alarm chirped. The tube rattled. Restrain him, someone said. Patel froze. Retractor still in his shaking hands, unsure how you restrain a body that is already open. June felt the clamp tremble in her grasp. She held it steady. Eli, she said, a voice low, close to his face. Stay with me. She did not know why she used his first name. She had read it on a piece of metal. That was all. Still, the name felt right in her mouth. Eli's eyes cut to her. They were bloodshot and wild, but there was a spark behind the panic. His gaze moved over her mask, searching for something he could recognize. His breathing became a ragged tug against the ventilator. The anesthesiologist swore softly. He is bucking the vent. Paralyze him, Holloway ordered. The anesthesiologist hesitated. If I paralyze and deepen right now, his pressure will fall. Holloway slammed a palm on the drape. Do it. Keene's voice went hard. Grant, stop. You have blood control for the first time in 10 minutes. Do not trade it for ego. Holloway turned on her. This is my room. June did not look up. She kept her eyes on Eli's face. The tube kept him from speaking, but his hands did not need language. His right hand tore free of the strap with a sudden jerk. Someone had secured it. Someone had not expected strength. His fingers found the edge of the drape, then the air, then June's wrist. His grip locked around her as if it were a rope. The pressure of his hand surprised her. It was not weak. It was desperate, full of muscle memory. The kind of grip that comes from hauling someone up, not from lying down. June felt the tug through her glove and into the bones of her arm. She did not pull away. She shifted her weight to keep the clamp steady. Eli's eyes held hers. He blinked once, then again, trying to clear the fog. His throat worked around the tube. A wet, strangled sound forced its way out. It was not clean, but it carried. June, he rasped. Patel made a small choking noise. Keene's eyes went wide. Even Tasha paused, a fresh pad hanging in her hand. Holloway stared, caught between irritation and disbelief. What did he say? Eli's grip tightened on June's wrist. His face contorted with effort. He tried again, the sound scraping past plastic and pain. Doc, he forced out. June. Mosul. The room seemed to tilt on that word. For an instant, June tasted dust that was not in the air. She felt vibration in her ribs that did not come from the ventilator. A red glow flickered behind her eyes, then vanished. She was back under white light, back in a room that smelled like antiseptic and hot plastic, with a man on a table and a clamp in her hand. Mosul. It landed in June's chest like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples moved fast, but she kept her face still. She could smell the antiseptic. She could hear the monitor. She could also hear rotor blades in the back of her head, the old thump that never fully left. Holloway's voice came out quieter. He knows you. June did not answer him. She kept her gaze on Eli. You are in Pittsburgh, she said. You are in a hospital. You are safe. Eli's eyes darted still wild. His grip did not loosen. He drew in a shallow breath, then pushed again with everything he had left. She saved us, he said, the words mangled but unmistakable. Callahan, she saved us. The silence that followed was absolute in the human parts of the room. The machines kept making noise, but no one spoke. Even the ventilator alarm settled when Eli's body paused, as if it too were listening. Holloway's hands stopped moving. Patel's retractor sagged a fraction before he corrected it, terrified of doing anything wrong. Keene stared at June with a new expression, one that looked like respect, trying to find a place to stand. The cynicism in her eyes had nowhere to go. Tasha's gaze flicked to June's pocket, where the coin sat. Then back to June's face, as if two separate puzzles had suddenly become one. Eli's eyes held June's. His fingers trembled, still clamped on her wrist. His mouth moved around the tube again. A string of sound came out, then shaped itself into something closer to a sentence. Combat, he rasped. She knows. The monitor beeped fast. His pressure was still low, but his heart was working stubborn and loud. Holloway swallowed. June could see it in the movement of his throat above the collar of his gown. His eyes shifted from Eli to June, then to the wound where June's clamp held the artery shut. The evidence sat in plain sight. Holloway stepped closer to the table, and when he spoke, the arrogance was thinner, stretched by fear. Dr. Callahan, he said. He did not call her the new girl. He did not call her second assist. He used her name the way you use a tool you finally understand you need. What do you need? June did not let the question inflate the moment. She kept one hand on the clamp, the other steady near the suction. She watched Eli's face, then the field, then the monitor. More clamps, she said, and blood, now. Holloway did not hesitate this time. His eyes flicked to the head of the bed. Massive transfusion, he said. Activate it. O negative running, get the blood bank on the phone. I want coolers in this room. The anesthesiologist nodded once, already moving. Copy. We are pushing. Tasha turned to the circulating nurse. Call it in. 2 coolers. Rapid infuser. The circulating nurse was already out the door. June kept her hands steady on the clamp. She felt the vessel throb against the metal like a trapped thing. Her wrist ached where Eli gripped her, but she did not move away. She leaned closer to his face. Eli, she said low enough that it felt private. I need your hand off me. His eyes were wide wet with effort. He blinked. His fingers loosened in slow increments like he was letting go of a ledge over a drop. When his grip finally released, his hand fell back onto the drape, trembling. June exhaled once and returned her full attention to the wound. Patel, she said, hold that retractor. Keep the angle. Do not chase it. Lock your elbows. Patel swallowed and adjusted his stance. His arms steadied, still shaking, but less. Keene shifted the overhead light a fraction, then held it there, precise. I have your field. June nodded without looking up. Thank you. Holloway hovered at her shoulder, hands ready, eyes fixed on the clamp she had placed. He spoke softly, almost careful. Tell me what you're seeing. June kept her voice calm. Rib fracture, sharp fragment. It tore an intercostal artery posterior. The bleed is tucked behind the shard. We clamp proximal and distal, then we ligate. After that, we reassess the chest. Holloway nodded once. The nod was small, but it changed the air. Do it. Tasha stepped in with a second clamp. June took it and slid it into the cavity with a controlled motion. Blood tried to fill the space, but suction cleared it fast now. The view stayed open. June found the vessel again just beyond the first clamp. She angled the second clamp across it. Click. The pulsing stopped completely. The cavity quieted, not silent, but calmer, as if the room had finally taken a breath. Pressure, June said. The anesthesiologist answered after a beat, watching the numbers climb like they had been hiding. 38, 42, still low but rising. Good, June said. Keep warming. Keep blood going. Holloway leaned closer. How do you want the shard handled? June looked at the jagged rib edge. It sat there like a knife left behind. We do not yank it. We stabilize it. We lift it with a clamp and we see what it is hiding. Keene's voice came in steady. I can hold it. June nodded. Hold the rib gently. Do not torque. Just give me sight. Keene placed a clamp on the rib fragment and lifted it a few millimeters, just enough. The movement revealed a small pocket of shredded tissue and a thread of bleeding that had been masked by the bone. June guided suction to clear the view. The artery lay pale under the light, now compressed by metal. The wound was ugly, not a clean cut. It looked chewed. Here, June said. Suture. Tasha placed the needle driver into June's hand. The tool felt right, familiar weight, familiar balance. June took a deep breath and made the first stitch. Her hands moved with a speed that did not look fast. They looked inevitable. Each motion had a reason. The needle entered tissue, curved through, and came out where she wanted it. She tied, she cut, she tied again. Patel watched, as if he was trying to learn a language by staring at someone's mouth. Holloway held his hands out. What can I do? June did not look up. Suction here, just off the edge. Do not touch the vessel. Let the blood show me the line. Holloway took the suction tip from June's other hand. He positioned it where she indicated, careful, almost reverent. His fingers were steady again, but his posture had changed. He was no longer leading. He was supporting. June placed another stitch. Then another. The artery stopped leaking between the clamps. The tissue around it looked less furious. Pressure, June said again. 52, the anesthesiologist replied. Heart rate 120, better. Eli's chest rose and fell with the ventilator. The movement still fought a little, as if his body remembered panic. His eyes were taped shut now, and his jaw stayed slack around the tube. Keene kept the rib fragment lifted. You called intercostal. That was it. June did not answer with pride. She answered with fact. The entry angle is wrong for a clean central hit. The blood pattern is wrong. It pulsed posterior. That is arterial. It was hidden. Holloway glanced at the anterior wounds, then back to the repaired vessel. He made a sound behind his mask, something like frustration turned inward. June did not comment. She tied another knot and cut the thread. Okay, she said. We release distal clamp first. Slow. Tasha leaned in ready with pads. Patel tightened his grip on the retractor. Holloway kept suction in place. June eased the distal clamp open a fraction. Blood did not surge. It stayed quiet. She opened it fully. Nothing. She glanced at the field. Good. Now proximal. She released the proximal clamp, slow. The vessel held. A thin shine of blood wet the suture line and stopped. No pulse of disaster. No sudden flood. June set the clamps aside. The relief in the room was physical. Not joy, not celebration. Just oxygen returning to lungs. The anesthesiologist's voice softened. Pressure, 68, trending up. June nodded once. She pressed a clean pad against the suture line and watched for any return of bright red. Holloway's voice came quiet. How did you see it that fast? June kept her eyes on the chest. You listen to the wound. It tells you where it hurts. Keen let out a single short breath that could have been a laugh, but it was more like disbelief. That is not in the manual. June did not look up, no. Tasha replaced saturated pads with clean ones. Her hands were quick, sure. Lap count stable now, she said. Patel swallowed. I thought I was going to drop the retractor. You did not, June said. Patel nodded, grateful, embarrassed, still shaking. June scanned the cavity for secondary bleeding. She moved the suction tip herself, now checking recesses, watching how blood moved when she cleared it. There was still ooze, but it behaved like oozing. It did not behave like a fire hose. The rib fragment remained a threat. June studied it for a second. Keen, she said. Keep it elevated while I smooth the edge. Keen's eyes narrowed. You want to trim it? Yes. If we leave it sharp, it will cut again when the lung expands. Holloway's voice came in careful. Do you want a rongeur? June nodded. Rongeur. Tasha placed it in her hand. June used it with controlled bites, removing the most dangerous splinters. The sound was small, a dull crunch, and it made Patel flinch. June did not. She had heard louder bones break in worse places. She set the tool down and checked the area again. The repaired vessel stayed quiet. The anesthesiologist spoke. Pressure, 78, warming. Blood is catching up. June looked at Holloway. Now we reassess. Quick check of the hilum, pericardium, lung parenchyma. Then we decide next step. Holloway nodded. Do it. June guided his hands with short instructions. Lift there. Look under that fold. Suction slightly left. Holloway followed, listening. Keen adjusted light. Patel held retraction without drifting. The team moved like a single body, not because they liked each other, but because the work demanded it. June inspected the lung surface. She found a small laceration that had been weeping, not gushing. She placed a few careful stitches to approximate the tissue. As she worked, she spoke in short pieces, more for the room than for herself. High-energy rounds do not just punch holes, she said. They push a wave. It can bruise tissue away from the track. Bone becomes shrapnel. The obvious wound is not always the main one. Patel's voice came small. You saw that in Mosul. June did not answer the place. She answered the concept. I saw it in bodies. Holloway watched her hands. The arrogance that had filled the room earlier had thinned into something quieter. Not admiration, not yet, but attention. Eli's numbers continued to improve in small steps. The monitor beeps settled into a steadier rhythm. Not calm, but less frantic. Pressure, 92, the anesthesiologist said. He sounded tired, relieved, focused, heart rate, 112. June allowed herself one small exhale. She kept it inside the mask. No one needed to see it. Tasha spoke. Blood cooler is here. Keep it ready, June said. We may need more. Holloway leaned in toward the lower drape line, eyes shifting toward the abdomen. That third wound. June glanced down for a moment. The small, neat hole sat below the ribs, innocent looking. She felt her stomach tighten. Small holes lied. She looked back at the chest field and the stable suture line. The room had earned a breath, but not a nap. June set her instrument down and looked at Holloway. Chest is controlled. We can close temporarily, or we can keep exposure while we evaluate the abdomen. Either way, we do not lose what we gained. Holloway nodded, taking in the words, weighing them. Temporary closure on chest, then abdomen. Keen's eyebrows rose, surprised at his willingness to pivot. She did not comment. June began the steps to stabilize the chest for transition. She placed pads, carefully checked her repairs again, then guided the retractor removal so the ribs returned without catching on the trimmed shard. The chest wall settled. The ventilator pushed air in and the lung expanded more evenly now. The monitor beeped. Steady, present, not celebratory, just alive. June kept her hands up, eyes scanning the field one last time, before moving on her mind, already narrowing to the next problem without saying it out loud. Tasha re-prepped the abdomen with fast, confident strokes, painting antiseptic across skin that looked too still. The small round wound below the ribs sat like a period at the end of a sentence that had not finished. Holloway repositioned at the table. He did not try to reclaim the room with volume. He spoke with a new restraint, as if the air itself had corrected him. Laparotomy, he said, midline. Keen glanced at June. You want to lead? June held his gaze for a beat, then shook her head once. You cut. I call what I see. Holloway nodded. The agreement was simple. It did not need ceremony. Tasha placed the scalpel in Holloway's hand. The blade flashed under the lights and then disappeared into skin. The abdomen opened in layers and the smell changed. Less metallic, more sour, the warm, damp scent of a body's interior. Suction caught thin fluid and blood in a steady pull. Patel leaned in, eyes fixed, quieter now. He looked older than he had an hour ago, Retract, Holloway said. Patel adjusted his stance and did it without shaking this time. The cavity revealed itself in careful increments. The bowel glistened under the light pale loops, shifting with each breath from the ventilator. Holloway's hands moved with familiar confidence again, but the confidence now had a boundary. He checked June's face once quick and then returned to the work. June watched for the story the wound wanted to tell. Blood did not pool fast the way it had in the chest. That was a mercy. Still, the damage was there. A bruised track through soft tissue, a small tear that oozed dark and steady. Not dramatic, but dangerous if ignored. There, June said, pointing with a gloved fingertip just above a fold of bowel. Mesenteric tear. Slow bleed. Holloway shifted the light. Keen angled suction. June leaned in and saw the frayed edge of tissue, the small vessel leaking the thin tremble that gave it away. You want a stitched? Holloway asked. June nodded. Ligate and reinforce, then trace the track. Holloway worked. He placed a clamp tied, then sutured with controlled motions. He was good. He always had been. The difference was that now he listened between stitches. Pressure, June asked. The anesthesiologist answered with relief that he tried to hide. 102/60, heart rate 105. The monitor beeped in a steadier rhythm. The sound no longer cut like a knife. It sounded like a metronome again, a machine doing its job. June followed the bullet path with her eyes. It had slipped between structures with cruel precision. It had bruised, torn, then kept going. The abdomen held more surprises than the chest, but less chaos. A small serosal injury on bowel, not full thickness. A superficial nick that could become infection if it was left behind. Repair that, June said. Keen's voice came low. You are seeing everything. June did not look up. I am looking. Holloway placed the repair. He irrigated, suctioned, irrigated again. The fluid ran clear, then clear enough. He checked for active bleeding and found none that mattered. The damage was controlled. Tasha's voice stayed calm as she spoke counts and times. Lap count is correct. Instrument count correct. Holloway exhaled slowly through his mask. Close. June watched as he closed fascia with heavy suture, then skin. The movements were steady now even. The room had a rhythm again. People passed tools without fumbling. Feet shifted less. Voices stayed low. When the last suture was cut, silence entered the spaces between the machines. The team stood around the table for half a second as if they were waiting for the body to argue. Eli did not. His chest rose with the ventilator. The numbers held. Transfer to ICU, Holloway said. The drapes came down. Warm blankets went on. Lines were secured. The gurney rolled in and the patient was moved with practiced care. Eli's face looked calmer now that the fight had been pushed back. His dog tags were still on the tray, where June had placed them, smeared with dried blood at the corner. June picked them up and set them near his shoulder before the blanket covered him. The chain slid over skin with a soft metallic whisper. As they pushed the bed toward the doors, the police officer from earlier appeared in the hall, waiting with the stillness of someone trained to stand through chaos. Is he alive? The officer asked, eyes fixed on the patient. He is, Holloway said, and his voice held a firmness that sounded like relief. The officer nodded once. Good. We need to talk when you can. Holloway did not promise anything. He just kept moving. They reached the ICU elevator. The doors opened with a quiet chime that felt wrong after alarms and suction. The elevator smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. June stood at the foot of the bed, watching Eli's hands, watching the tape, the IV lines, the tremor that had finally eased. In the elevator, Patel spoke for the first time in minutes. His voice came out thin and honest. I have never seen anyone clamp like that, he said, eyes on June. You did not even hesitate. June kept her gaze on Eli's chest rise. Hesitation is a habit, she said. Keen gave a short sound behind her mask, somewhere between disbelief and admiration. You talk like you have done this 100 times. June did not answer. She did not need to. The elevator doors opened. ICU lights were softer, dimmer, less theatrical. The air felt warmer. A nurse met them with a chart and quick questions. The handoff was clean. Numbers, fluids, findings, repairs, plans. When the ICU doors closed behind the bed, the hallway went quiet, in the way hospitals do after they swallow a crisis. The team stood there for a moment, gowns wrinkled, gloves stained, faces marked by the lines masks left behind. Holloway stripped his gloves off with a snap and tossed them into the bin. He did not speak right away. He watched June remove hers, slow and careful, as if she were peeling away a layer of someone else's day. Keen left first, offering a small nod to June on her way out. It was not friendly, it was respectful. Patel followed, still looking like he had been struck by something heavy and invisible. Tasha stayed long enough to wipe a smear of blood off her shoe with a paper towel, then looked up at June. "You held steady," Tasha said. June met her eyes. "So did you." Tasha's mouth moved like she might say more, then she chose not to. She walked away with her clipboard tucked against her hip. June started toward the locker room. Holloway fell into step beside her. His shoes squeaked softly against the polished floor. "I owe you," he said. June did not slow. The patient does not care. Holloway's jaw tightened. "I was wrong." June glanced at him quick. His eyes looked tired now, the kind of tired that comes from being afraid and having nowhere to put it. "You were focused," June said. "Focus can turn into tunnel vision." "That is a polite word for it," Holloway replied. June stopped at the scrub room sink. She turned the water on and let it run over her hands, even though the gloves were gone. The warmth felt almost aggressive. She scrubbed away the faint red stain that had seeped into the creases at her knuckles. Holloway stood behind her, waiting like he did not know where to put his hands without a scalpel. He spoke again, quieter. "Mosul." June's fingers slowed. She looked up into the mirror. Holloway's face was behind hers, blurred by steam. "Yes," she said. "You were there." June rinsed soap away. The water ran clear. "Yes," Holloway exhaled. "He recognized you." June shut off the water with her elbow. He was scared. People reach for what they know. Holloway swallowed, "And you knew what to do." June dried her hands and folded the paper towel twice neat. She dropped it into the bin. "I knew what the wound was doing," she said. Holloway hesitated, then asked the question that had been sitting under his pride since the incision. "How could you tell it was not overseas? You said something earlier, like home." June's eyes shifted not to him, but to the memory of the entry angles and the spacing. The way the injuries sat in a pattern that did not match a firefight. The way the wounds looked close, clustered, personal. She kept her voice low. "The spread is tight. The angles are wrong for distance. No fragmentation from armor. No dust. No embedded grit. No secondary debris. This looks like a handgun at close range, not a rifle downrange." Holloway's face went still. He stared at her as if the room had cooled. "So this was not combat," he said. June shook her head once. Not overseas." Holloway looked away, jaw working. "Jesus." June started walking again. Her body felt heavy now that the adrenaline had faded. The hospital hallway stretched ahead bright and clean, as if nothing had happened. At a window near the stairwell, she caught a glimpse of the river again. Dark water. Steel bridge. Cars moving in a thin line of light. June stood there for a moment looking out. Her reflection hovered faintly in the glass, half ghost, half surgeon. Her hand drifted to her pocket. The coin sat there, still warm. She did not press it. She just felt its shape, then let her hand fall. The beeping from a distant monitor echoed down the hall, steady and indifferent, and June turned back toward the lockers without speaking. The next days moved the way hospitals always moved after a crisis. Fast in the rooms, slow in the hallways. Eli Navarro lived behind ICU doors where the light stayed dim and the voices stayed low. June checked his labs, listened to his lungs, watched the swelling ease in small, stubborn steps. His chest tube output slowed. His color came back in shades, not all at once. She did not tell anyone about the coin. She did not tell anyone what Mosul sounded like at night. She did her work and kept her head down. 3 weeks passed. On a cold morning with thin sunlight, June crossed the main concourse toward physical therapy. The glass atrium held the gray outside at bay, but the chill still found its way in through every opening door. People moved with coffee cups and badges talking about weekend plans and weather that never made up its mind. June had a chart on her tablet and a list of post-op patients to round on. She was halfway through it when she heard a familiar sound. Rubber tips on tile. A steady scrape, then a pause, then another scrape. She looked toward the therapy wing and saw him. Eli was upright. That alone made her stop. He stood inside the parallel bars, hands wrapped around the rails, shoulders tight with effort. His hair had grown in unevenly where it had been shaved. He looked thinner, but the shape of him had returned. The same stubborn line in his jaw. The same set of his brow, like he was arguing with pain and refusing to lose. A physical therapist stood beside him, one hand hovering near Eli's back, not touching, respectful, ready. "Easy," the therapist said. "Shift your weight, heel first." Eli took a step that looked like it cost him everything. He breathed out through his teeth. Sweat glistened at his temples. Then he glanced up and saw June. His face changed in one beat. The hard focus softened into something like relief, then sharpened again into a grin that tried to hide it. "Doc," he said. His voice was rough, but it was his. No tube, no plastic, just sound. June walked into the room. The air smelled like rubber mats and disinfectant and warmed skin. A radio played low in a corner. something upbeat that did not match the concentration on people's faces. A woman on a stationary bike stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. A man worked a resistance band with trembling arms, lips moving, as if he were counting. Eli shifted his weight and held himself steady. "Look at me," he said. "Not dead." June stopped at arm's length, careful not to crowd him. "You are not dead," she agreed. The therapist smiled politely. "He has been saying that all week." Eli's grin widened. "She is the reason." June's gaze flicked to the therapist. "How is he doing?" "Better than he wants to admit," the therapist said. "And worse than he thinks he should be." Eli rolled his eyes, then winced because rolling his eyes made his chest pull. "That is rude." June's mouth twitched. It was not quite a smile, but it was close enough that Eli noticed. "There it is," he said. "I knew you had one." June kept her voice calm. "What are your vitals with exertion?" Eli made a face. "She is here, and you go straight to vitals." "Habits," June said. He nodded as if he understood that word in his bones. "Mine kept me alive. Yours did too." The therapist stepped back. "I will give you 5 minutes. Do not let him try anything heroic." Eli lifted a hand off the rail in a small salute. "No promises." When the therapist walked away, Eli's grin faded into something quieter. He kept both hands on the bars, again fingers white around the grips. June lowered her tablet slightly. "How is your pain?" "It is there," Eli said. "It is always there, but it is quieter now." June nodded once. "Good." Eli studied her face. His eyes were clearer than they had been in the operating room. Still tired, but present. He looked like someone who had been underwater and finally learned how to breathe again, even if his lungs still hurt. "I remember your voice," he said. June did not move. "In the operating room." "Yeah," he said. "I remember the lights. I remember thinking it was the sun. I remember thinking I was back. Then I saw you." And it was like the room stopped spinning. June felt her chest tighten a familiar pressure. Not fear, responsibility. "You were waking up under anesthesia," she said, keeping it clinical, giving him a rope to hold. Eli shook his head slow. It was not just that. He took a careful breath and shifted his weight again, testing his balance. His shoulders shook with the effort of staying upright. "I came back here," he said, voice lower now. "And people kept acting like the war was a movie I watched once, like I could just turn it off." June listened. Her face stayed neutral, but her eyes did not drift. Eli swallowed. "I stopped sleeping. Then I stopped eating. Then I stopped answering my phone." It got quiet in my apartment, the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder. June's fingers found the edge of her pocket, not pressing the coin, just touching it. Eli kept talking, words coming out like he had been holding them back so long they had gained weight. "That night," he said and paused. His jaw tightened. "The night I got shot, I was walking." June waited. Eli's eyes flicked toward the window at the end of the therapy hall. Beyond it, the river was visible in a narrow strip. Dark water, steel bridge, cars sliding across like beads on a string. "I was headed for the bridge," Eli said. June did not ask which bridge. Pittsburgh had plenty. The fact was enough. Eli's grip on the bars tightened. His knuckles turned pale. "I was tired," he said. "Not body tired. Soul tired. I kept thinking I was the only one who could not figure out how to be normal again. I kept thinking maybe the part of me that mattered stayed over there." June's throat went tight. She did not let it change her voice. And then Eli said, "I stopped at that store. I do not even know why. Habit, water, something." His eyes narrowed as if he could see the fluorescent lights in his memory. "There was a kid," he said, maybe 16, hoodie, hands shaking, gun too big for him. He was yelling at the clerk. Old guy, the kind who calls everyone sweetheart." Eli's lips pressed together. The kid's voice cracked, the gun wobbled, the clerk's hands were up. I watched all of it like I was behind glass. June could smell the faint gunpowder again, even though it was not there. Eli's voice got quieter. "I realized something in that moment. I did not want to die because I was broken. I wanted to disappear because I thought I had nothing left to offer. But then I saw that old man and my body just moved." June watched Eli's chest rise. He winced slightly, then kept going. "I stepped in," he said. "Not smart, not tactical, just instinct. I said something. I do not even remember what. I only remember the kid's eyes. He looked terrified. Then he fired." Eli's gaze dropped to his hands on the bars. His fingers trembled. "I felt the impact," he said. "Then I felt the floor come up. I remember thinking, so this is it. And then the ambulance. And then white light. And then you." June held his gaze until he looked up again. Eli's eyes shone, but he did not let tears fall. He blinked hard and shifted his jaw, pushing it down. "When I saw you," he said, "it was not just relief. It was hope. Like proof that I had been something real. That I was not just a man who came home and fell apart." June took a slow breath. She kept her voice even. "You did something that night," she said. "You protected someone." Eli scoffed softly. "And got myself shot." You are alive, June said. And the clerk is alive. Those things can exist in the same sentence. Eli stared at her for a moment. The therapist's music drifted behind them, cheerful and thin. You talk like you have said that before, Eli said. June did not answer the implication. She shifted the focus back to him the way she always did when a room got too heavy. How is your breathing when you walk? She asked. Eli huffed a laugh, then grimaced. You are relentless. I am consistent, June said. He looked at her with something like gratitude hiding behind sarcasm. It hurts when I take a deep breath. Not sharp, more like a pull. And sometimes I get this rush like I'm about to bolt, like my body thinks something is coming. June nodded. That makes sense. Eli's eyes narrowed. Most people say I should just calm down. June kept her tone level. Your body learned patterns under stress. It does not forget because a calendar changed. Eli let that sit. His shoulders lowered a fraction as if a weight had been named and therefore shared. He took a careful step in place, testing himself. The therapist says I might go home soon. June glanced at his posture, his balance. If you keep doing the work. Eli's mouth lifted. There is that almost smile again. June ignored it. Do you have someone to check on you? Eli hesitated. The pause told her enough. My sister, he said. She calls. I do not always answer. June's fingers brushed the coin again. Not a press. Just a reminder that metal could be solid even when people felt less so. Answer her, June said. Eli's throat bobbed. Yeah. A silence settled between them, not awkward, just full. Eli looked past June toward the hall. You still carry it, he said suddenly. June's eyes sharpened. Carry what? He nodded toward her pocket. That coin. You had it in Mosul. You flipped it in your hand when you were thinking. I saw it once when you took your gloves off. June held still. The coin felt heavier now, like it knew it had been noticed. I still have it, she said. Eli nodded, satisfied. Good. Some things should stay. June did not comment. She lifted her tablet, again, a small return to structure. I will check your imaging and talk to your team, she said. Eli's expression shifted, a flicker of worry. Doc. June paused. Yes. He looked at her and the tough marine face broke just enough to show the person underneath. Thank you, he said, for that day, for seeing me, not just the blood. June held his gaze for a long beat. Then she gave a small nod. You have therapy, she said. Eli's mouth twitched. Yes, ma'am. June stepped back, giving him space. Eli reset his hands on the rails and took another step, slow and deliberate. The therapist returned and resumed her position at his side, ready and steady. June walked out of the room into the hall where the air felt cooler again. She moved toward the window at the end of the corridor without thinking. Outside, the river cut through the city, dark and patient. The bridge held its line across the water, carrying strangers over depth they did not look at. June stood there for a moment, feeling the coin's shape through fabric, listening to the distant rhythm of a monitor somewhere in the building, steady and indifferent. And then she turned back into the flow of the hospital. June turned back into the flow of the hospital. By noon, the atrium was louder. Volunteers pushed carts of magazines. A kid in a cast hopped beside his mother, trying to keep up. Two interns argued softly over a coffee order, the kind of argument that meant nothing. Above them, the glass ceiling held back a sky the color of steel wool. June kept moving, tablet tucked under her armcoat, buttoned wrong because she had been thinking about the bridge, about Eli's hands on the parallel bars, about the way his voice had sounded when he said hope like it was something he did not trust yet. She was rounding on a patient and stepped down when her pager buzzed. A short message. Holloway, conference room, B now. June read it twice, then slid the pager back into her pocket. She finished the note in the chart with clean, careful taps. She did not hurry. Hurrying belonged to panic. She had already done enough panic for one lifetime. Conference room B sat off a quieter hallway near administration. The carpet was thicker there. The air smelled less like antiseptic and more like printer toner. A plaque on the wall listed donors, names stacked in gold letters. Inside, Holloway stood by the window with a folder in his hands. Keene sat at the table, arms folded. Patel hovered near the coffee station, pretending he had a reason to be there. Tasha leaned against the far wall with her clipboard face neutral, as if she had been assigned to witness. Holloway turned when June entered. His posture was still straight, but his eyes did not slide past her this time. Thanks for coming, he said. June took the chair closest to the door and set her tablet down. You paged me. Keene's mouth twitched. Patel stared at the coffee cups like they held answers. Holloway opened the folder. There were typed pages and a few charts, the kind of paperwork that tried to make pain fit inside margins. We have had an increase in veteran admissions, Holloway said. Not just trauma. Medical, psych, overdoses, falls, fights, people who come in hot and leave angry. June watched his hands on the paper. He was careful with it, like it could cut. Some of them crash because we miss what the history is doing to their bodies, Holloway continued. Some of them crash because nobody speaks their language. Keen let out a soft breath through her nose. And some of them crash because the staff gets spooked the second someone looks like they might swing. Holloway glanced at her, then back to June. Administration wants a program, a dedicated track, training, protocols, liaison with the VA, a way to stop reinventing the wheel every time a patient walks in with a uniform in their past. June did not reach for the folder, and you want me to run it? Holloway's pause was brief, but it was there, yes. Patel looked up, then eyes wide like he was hearing the words land in the room. June kept her face still. Why? Holloway's jaw tightened, then eased. Because you saw what I did not see. Because you did not freeze when it got ugly. Because the patient called your name like it mattered. Keen leaned forward a fraction. Also, because it is hard to argue with someone who clamps an artery like they are closing a door. Tasha's eyes stayed on June, steady and unreadable. June finally took the folder and flipped it open. Pages of proposals, budgets, staffing needs, a timeline that was ambitious and messy. She scanned it quickly, not reading every word, just feeling the shape of it. You have support, Holloway said. From me, from the department. Keen's voice was dry. From me too. If you are building something, build it right. June looked up. This is not a trophy. Holloway nodded. I know. June closed the folder and placed it flat on the table. Her hands rested on top, fingers spread grounded. I will do it, she said. Patel made a small sound of breath that escaped before he could stop it. Holloway's shoulders lowered, as if he had been holding them up for days. Good. June held his gaze. One condition. Holloway did not flinch. Name it. June's voice stayed calm. In my operating room, in my training rooms, in my hallways, nobody gets punished for speaking up about a patient. Not by tone, not by sarcasm, not by silence. Keen's eyes narrowed, then softened in a way that surprised even her. She looked away first. Holloway's throat worked. He nodded once. Agreed. June glanced toward Tasha. And nursing gets a voice at the table. Not as a courtesy. Tasha's mouth moved almost a smile. About time. Holloway nodded again. Agreed. June stood. Then we start. The next weeks were not cinematic. They were fluorescent. They were late nights and early mornings. They were meetings where people tried to solve a human problem with a form. June turned a small room near the simulation lab into a classroom. She brought in old injury photos with identifying details removed. She mapped bullet paths on laminated anatomy sheets with dry erase markers. She had Patel hold retractors until his shoulders burned, then taught him how to shift his stance so the burn moved away. She made Keen run scenarios where the obvious answer was wrong. Keen hated it. Keen kept coming back. Tasha built checklists that actually matched what happened in real rooms, not what looked good on paper. She corrected doctors with the same bluntness she used to correct medication labels. Holloway sat in the back, the first day, arms crossed, listening. He did not interrupt. He did not try to make it his. When June asked him a question, he answered it. When someone else spoke, he let them finish. The staff learned to call the blood bank earlier. They learned to ask veterans what they needed before they told them what to do. They learned to recognize a body that was bracing for danger, even while lying in a hospital bed. June kept the language plain. She did not dress it up. She did not soften the edges. In the trauma bay, the changes showed up in small ways. A nurse paused before touching a patient's shoulder and asked first. A resident lowered his voice when a patient's eyes went distant. A security officer stepped back when June raised a hand and said, "Not like that." Eli Navarro came by once, still walking with a careful stiffness, a little slower than he wanted to be. He sat in the back of a training session and listened. When a nurse asked how it felt to wake up scared, Eli shrugged, then spoke anyway. "It feels like you are late to a fire," he said, "and everybody else is acting like it is just smoke from toast." The room got quiet. June watched faces shift. Not pity, not fear. Something closer to attention. 6 months after the surgery, the atrium held a different kind of crowd. A banner hung near the main entrance, white cloth with dark letters. The Eli Navarro Bridge Clinic for Veteran Trauma Care. The name was simple. The word bridge mattered in a city built from steel spans. Outside, the river moved the way it always moved, patient and dark under winter sun. Chairs were set in neat rows. Hospital staff filled most of them. A few people wore suits. A few wore uniforms. June sat in the front row, shoulders squared, dress uniform, pressed ribbons catching light in small, hard flashes. She kept her hands folded in her lap. Her coin was in her pocket, quiet. Holloway sat beside her, not in the center, not elevated, just present. He looked uncomfortable in the attention, which made him look more human than she had expected. Eli stood at the podium when they called his name. He moved without the walker now, but his gait still carried a hint of caution, like he respected the ground for what it could do. He looked out at the room and cleared his throat. "I did not plan to be here," he said. Voice steady. "I planned to be done." A hush settled. Even the volunteers stopped moving. Eli's eyes flicked toward June. "Not dramatic, just real. They saved my body in an operating room, he continued. That is true. But someone also looked at me like I was still worth the trouble. And that is a different kind of saving. He paused, swallowing. The air held. I work with other veterans now, he said. Guys who are stuck in that quiet apartment kind of silence. I tell them to answer the phone. I tell them to come in before it becomes an ambulance ride. I tell them this place has people who know what it looks like when your body is still in a different country. And a few heads nodded in the crowd, slow and heavy. Eli stepped back from the microphone. The room erupted into applause. It came in waves, hands striking hands, a sound that filled the atrium and climbed toward the glass ceiling. June felt it in her chest, a steady thump that matched an old memory and did not hurt. Holloway leaned toward her, voice low. He is doing good. June kept her eyes forward. He is doing work. After the ceremony, the crowd broke into smaller knots. People shook hands. People took photos under the banner. A hospital administrator tried to position June near a camera. June stepped aside and let Tasha stand there instead. Tasha accepted the attention with a brief nod and a look that said she would return to work in 5 minutes. Patel found June near the edge of the atrium, holding a paper cup of water like he did not trust coffee anymore. Dr. Callahan, he said. June turned. Patel. He looked nervous, then decided to speak anyway. Tomorrow's case. The consulate from the highway pileup. I reviewed the imaging. I think there is a posterior bleed risk. The entry angle is strange. June watched him for a beat. Not the words, the posture. The way he stood. The way his eyes stayed on her face instead of drifting toward the room. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the coin. Patel's eyes locked on it. He did not touch it yet. June placed it in his palm. The metal looked small there, but it carried weight. Hold it, she said. Patel swallowed. What? June's voice stayed calm. It keeps your hands honest. He stared at the stamped eagle, then closed his fingers around it like he was afraid it might vanish. June looked past him toward the windows. The river moved below the bridge, dark and steady. Outside, cars crossed without stopping. Inside the atrium, lights hummed. Somewhere deeper in the building, a monitor beeped in a quiet room, keeping time with a life that refused to leave. June let the sound sit in the air, then turned back toward the hallway, coat in hand, ready to go back where the work lived. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If the story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.